We're in the capital of America's first state, the city of Dover, the largest city in Kent County and the second largest city in Delaware. On December 3rd, 1787, at the Golden Fleece Tavern, Delaware officials approved the U.S. Constitution and ratified it on December 7th, making Delaware the first state. And within the corners of this city, the supreme law of the land was established. Hi, I'm Jose, and I welcome you to the greater area of Dover, the capital region of Delaware, and one of its most important areas. On this tour, we'll travel to the historic district to learn about Delaware's past and the events that led to becoming the first state. We'll also explore the capital's attractions and the natural lands that make up the state's unique geography. So let's go on tour to the capital city of Dover, Delaware. So we look at some of the buildings that surround the green. For example, the Old State House. It's a preserved artifact of Delaware's past. It served as the state's capital from the early days of the United States all the way to 1933. And now it's been restored as a museum to take visitors through Delaware's fascinating history. And then there's also the Legislative Hall, a Georgian colonial revival-styled building that replaced the Old State House in the 1930s. Outside of being home to Delaware's political seat, it contains the Hall of Governors. It's a portrait memorabilia of all the governors that have served the state of Delaware. The capital city of the state of Delaware, and the birthplace of the first state, the Golden Fleece Tavern, the meeting point where Delaware's leaders signed off on America's Constitution, giving birth to a nation's government. And the Old State House, the original state capital of Delaware, has seen so much of the state's transformation. It's located on the historic green. The Old State House is a landmark, reminding its visitors of America's earlier days. And I observed the State House transfixed by its wonderful architecture. The capital city of Dover is filled with remnants of America's past. The early days of colonialism, when American states were known as the territories. And across the green is Delaware's current State House, Legislative Hall. It's been Delaware's Capitol building since 1933. Delaware's state, where its representatives aligned with a new document following America's independence in 1776, and also the failed Articles of Confederation. If we really get into the details, across the cube, we see an etching of the 26 amendments at the time of creating the sculpture. The 27th Amendment is omitted from the sculpture because it didn't pass for another 6 years. And the positioning of the cube is in a metaphor balance, representing the 3 branches of the federal government. And the stars and stripes are of the original 13 colonies. This sculpture was unveiled at the 200th anniversary of the Constitution. The story of America, the young nation made up of immigrants with democratic principles, who broke free from monarch rules in the form of government embodied by King George. At Constitution Park, we see the etchings and quotations of the nation's development, plaques that feature the states and the year they were incorporated, or the famous sayings of the Constitution, "We the people." As I walk to the centerpiece of the park, we're reminded of the importance of Dover and Delaware State, where on this very street, the leaders of Delaware did what other territories were hesitant to sign off on. So let's look at the story. Delaware stood up and believed in the idea. Where would this country be if it wasn't for Delaware's leadership? The Delaware Assembly believed in the U.S. Constitution and were the first to ratify what would become the law of the land, marking Delaware as the first American state post-Revolutionary War. And in that instance, it set the precedence for a new nation that would become a global leader and change the landscape of the world. So I guess the tour's calling. It's time to go. Delaware. I'm exploring the state to find out why it's the first state. When we look at Dover, Delaware, it's called an ancient town. I mean, it was founded in 1717 and has been the capital since 1777. For example, the Delaware State House. It's the second oldest in America. That just goes to show the age of this town. And as far as the area, the capital is in Kent County. It was predominantly a grain farming region in the 18th century. If you drive around the area, you're still going to encounter plenty of farmland. The Greater Dover area has ties to the Air Force. During the 1960s, it used to manufacture spacesuits for NASA. Welcome to the Air Mobility Museum in the Greater Dover area and the larger Kent County, home to the Dover Air Force Base, one of the most active bases across the United States. When we visited Newcastle, we kept seeing military planes fly by. Dover is home to one of the largest and busiest freight terminals for the Department of Defense. Enter the museum as we walk through the hallway of legendary personnel, only to be greeted by astonishing vessels that are on display in this giant airplane hangar. In this museum, we see planes of all types from across the wars that have involved the US military, and wax figures that represent the soldiers who operated those machines. The museum was opened in 1986 as a historical center for Dover's Air Force, and the exhibits have since expanded to contain other elements from America's military history, like general purpose Willys or Jeeps to the everyday public. At one time, they were known as the greatest contribution to American warfare. As I make my way through the middle of the museum, I look around, fascinated by the aircrafts. And the first aircraft that started it all, it's known as a Turf and Sport Special, a wrecked C-47A Skytrain, originally found in a dump by Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So let's enter the aircraft to get a closer look. Wow, this is, it's fascinating. Wow. This is so cool. Yeah, it's so cool. Wow. Wow, this is so fascinating. Wow. And I'm in the cockpit. Amazing. The museum contains over 30 aircrafts, and per the museum director, there are planes in this establishment that are the first, last, and only of their kind in the world. Let's go to the outside for a different experience. The mission of this museum is to collect and preserve these artifacts, including the stories of personnel who operated the machines that are simply stunning when viewing them in person. Like the F-101 Voodoo, the fighter jet assigned to protect the eastern seaboard during the Cold War. If you're a lover of aviation and want to know more about America's Air Force history, you should come and visit this museum. You'll have a fantastic time. And more than a fantastic time, you'll get an appreciation for the details and hard work engineers put into making these beautiful vessels take to the skies. The level of engineering on these aircrafts is truly remarkable. To think, almost 100 years ago, none of this existed. Military fighter jets didn't really make their mark until World War II in the late 1930s. so this technology is still a fairly young concept.
Carries 6 Greyhound buses to anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Just 65 years within one lifetime.
Yeah.
That is. So it shows you just how quick technology changes.
And near the fences, we're still reminded that next to the museum is one of America's busiest Air Force bases. As we head to the next destination, we get surrounded by the beauty of Delaware's natural lands. At the Bombay Hook National Wildlife Refuge, we can go sightseeing and get a closer look at all the migratory birds. Delaware is a state with low population, allowing it to create this wonderful natural retreat. As I take out my binoculars and look from the observation deck, I see all the amazing birds just enjoying their moment in the pond. The Delaware Bay is the second largest staging area for migratory shorebirds in North America, so you'll be sure to see one-of-a-kind species. Visitors take their time as they drive across in their vehicles, and at a glance, over 300 species of birds can be found in this refuge.
The beauty of Delaware's natural lands. Delaware has 19 reserves protecting about 68,000 acres for wildlife.
Down on the ground, we take the walking path to some of the salt marsh, the most valuable wildlife habitat in Delaware. The first state contains mineral-rich soil, which makes it one of its most important resources. It's ideal for farming, where potatoes, corn, and soybeans become Delaware's top distributed crops, making the area of Dover one of the most unique capital areas in the country.
The state of Delaware borders the Delaware Bay and the Atlantic Ocean. It contains more than 380 miles of shoreline. Bowers Beach is one of the many beaches within the area of Dover, a small fishing community. At its peak, the town would see up to 300 boats lined up at its dock.
The Delaware shoreline is a place that's busy, with everyone enjoying their early entry into the warmer weather. From the frantic sounds of seagulls, to boats getting docked and prepped for cruising, and the buggies riding on the beach. All the noises of a summer day can be heard with the crashes of the waves. And I look out into the sunset from this scenic town facing the Delaware Bay. Bowers Beach brings visitors to engage in all forms of outdoor excitement, from fishing to swimming. It feels like the summer season has just begun. And the horizon calls me as the tour takes us across this amazing state to experience these charming towns that contain such a unique escape. A story of America's first capital turned into an adventure of the best of Delaware. From its history to military connection, natural lands, and beachside villages, the first state is truly a one-of-a-kind journey.
Delaware is such a fascinating state, and no matter the town you visit, you're in for a unique experience. The Capital District gives you a piece of history with traditional colonial buildings and museums that commemorate the establishment of the first state. Then we have the beautiful natural lands of Delaware. Truly a remarkable escape through the pages of history, giving us a new outlook to the story of America. I'm Jose, and if you like what you see in a day, please subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and share. If you want to see more in the state of Delaware, please stay tuned for the following video. Until next time.